Matt Capko, given the news that we have reported this week, I have to ask, have you ever messed with the scammers if you know you are being scammed, whether it's a phishing email, text message, anything like that?
No, I don't tempt fate like that. I just mark as spam and delete.
No, you got to have fun with it every once in a while. I can remember one of the scams that has come through. It hasn't been around as much. I remember during the pandemic, I would get them a lot. It was like the text messages where it was like, hey, this is your boss. I need you to go to CVS and buy lots of gift cards. And it was always great because I would get them when I would be on calls with the boss in question. And then it was obviously like, oh, okay. Well, not that they would ever fool me otherwise, because why would a boss need gift cards at any point? But it was always fun to be like, just send them sports scores, recipes, or make up a story where it was like, oh, this is for like our plans of like intergalactic domination, and just ultimately like ridiculous stuff. And it was always fun to see them get mad that they were not responding to the messages. So we have a new scam now that I might do it the next time I get one, because Lord knows we're going to be getting these text messages for a while. So
yeah, certainly.
More on that on this episode of Safe Mode.
Welcome to Safe Mode. I'm Greg Otto, editor-in-chief at Cyberscoop. Every week, we break down the most pressing security issues in technology, providing you the knowledge and the tools to stay ahead of the latest threats, while also taking you behind the scenes of the biggest stories in cybersecurity.
An attack is coming.
It's about keeping us safe.
He's just a disgruntled hacker.
She's a super hacker.
Stay alert.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.
This is Safe Mode.
Welcome to Safe Mode, your cybersecurity podcast for all things going on in the cybersecurity industry. My name is Greg Otto, editor-in-chief of Cyberscoop, and I will be joined in my interview segment this week by Allie Bohan, a consultant with FTI Consulting. We're going to talk about all of the non-technical things that can happen during a ransomware attack. You know, here on Safe Mode and on the pages of Cyberscoop, we talk a lot about all of the technical parts of a ransomware attack. But look, there are things that go on if attack does happen that have nothing to do with the technology. And we get into that with Allie. But first, talking with Matt Capko, reporter for Cyberscoop. Matt, this story really resonated that we did this week. Resonated more than I even thought was possible. If you have been getting these toll road text scam messages, we did a story that you should be interested in. And by the looks of it, a lot of people are interested because a lot of people are getting these text messages. So I'll stop there. What do we got, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's remarkable, and I always enjoy getting to write stories that you can talk to friends and family about. Right? It's not very technical. Everyone experiences these scams, but yeah, it's widespread. Everybody I've talked to about this are receiving these texts saying that they've not paid a toll for a toll road, and yeah, the cyber criminals are trying to trick them into entering financial information, stealing their credit card info. Very similar stuff, and similar group, same group that is behind the missed packages deliveries that we were all receiving texts about around the holidays.
Right. Talk to me about what researchers told you, like that. What is like the scam loop? Like what is really trying to happen on these scam texts? Because there's a little bit of a wrinkle where it's like, no, they're just not asking for $20. Like, what's really the loop here?
Yeah, they ultimately want your credit card information, and they will package these together with thousands, tens of thousands of others, and try to resell that information for follow-on attacks. So yeah, they're not after the $5, $10, $20. They're thinking much bigger than that.
So even though this has resonated with people that do not have a technical background, obviously we're here to talk about the technical aspect of what goes into the scam. And I know that you've talked to some experts. And what did the experts tell you in terms of who's pulling this off? What are they doing to pull it off? And how is it so pervasive? Because it really does feel like everybody that we've talked to for the story is like, oh yeah, I get these text messages all the time.
Yeah, so researchers attribute this to groups working on behalf of China or working from China. They are registering tens of thousands of malicious domains that are meant to look like a normal domain for these toll road agencies. Part of the issue there is that these toll road agencies, there's no uniformity to these domains. They're all a little scattered and all over the place, so that gives them an opening. And they are also registering SIM cards out of countries where SIM cards are very cheap to get, and associating those SIM cards with email addresses and then mass sending messages to unsuspecting victims.
Yeah, the SIM card angle is really interesting and goes to show, this is just my personal opinion, that these scams aren't necessarily like the sophisticated, I'm using air quotes for people that aren't watching. That word gets thrown around so much in what we covered. This is one that just is not sophisticated. And you know it's not sophisticated when people are getting text messages from +44 numbers, which is a UK number, and it's like, oh, pay your toll for the Massachusetts Turnpike because you have unpaid violations. Like, even the most technically inept people out there would be like, what? Like, this doesn't look like a number I've ever seen before in my life. Why is the Massachusetts the Department of Transportation or whatever it is, they're texting me about this? I just find that it is really something that this is so like novice level stuff, and yet it is so pervasive.
Yeah, it's a very low level scam. And it's pretty easy to spot that this is not legit. Unfortunately, I think part of the problem is just that they're asking for a low dollar amount, threatening to be, reported to their state motor vehicle agency or excessive fines in addition. And too many people are deciding to just pay this $5 or whatever it might be to just move on, get it over with.
And have you heard from any experts that talked about what can be done to sort of stop this? Because I do feel like I can't get over the fact of that. There's a little inside baseball for our listeners. We had the idea to do this story because we have all gotten them ourselves. And the more that we talked to whoever, they were like, oh yeah, we get these all the time. So we did the research, published a story. And the story has been one of our most read stories of the year, to the point that we were kind of blown away from the fact that, like, oh, this is more pervasive than we even imagined. So with that said, did you talk to anybody about what the telcos could do or what internet companies could do to really try to stop these from even getting to the point where they're sent?
Yeah, it's a challenge because most of these are being sent over IP, over regular internet infrastructure. They're not all necessarily traversing the mobile network infrastructure. So it makes it more difficult for them to track it that way. But yes, the FCC, FTC are working on this. The Industry Association for Wireless Network Providers in the US is working on this too. But it's a bit like whack-a-mole. The most you can do is file a complaint with the respective agencies, delete the messages so that your phone doesn't think that they're from a legit sender, report as spam, block that sender, that sort of thing. But it's difficult to stop. And from the authorities that I spoke with, it's a challenge for them to bring it to a stop.
So it is difficult to stop, but what is difficult also presents an opportunity out there. So I say to any listeners, industry listeners, government listeners, whoever is out there thinking about this stuff, I sound like a broken record. This will be the last time that I say it. This really does affect such a wide swath of the population. So there's an opportunity for somebody to come up with some widget, some app, some solution, I guess, is the best way to put it, to make sure that this just annoying little scam goes away and we can all just return to our normal group chats without any worry that somebody's trying to get into our pockets. So, Matt, Really appreciate the effort and for checking in on this scam. And I'm sure we'll be all over the next one that comes, because this is so pervasive and so annoying, but it's definitely worth keeping people abreast of what's going on.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Greg.
Joining us for our interview segment this week is Allie Bohan, a senior director at FTI Consulting. You know, a lot of what we talk about when it comes to ransomware has to do with the technical aspects. Obviously, if a ransomware actor locks things up, you need to do things from a technical standpoint. However, there's a bit that goes on behind the scenes when it comes to ransomware that organizations and enterprises have to be prepared for. How do you communicate to your clients? How do you communicate to your stakeholders? How do you deal with what the psychological impact can be? Allie and I discussed this along with some of the trends we're seeing in the space and what organizations can do to really make sure that they have everything in line if they are to be attacked by cyber criminals. Check it out. Okay, and joining us on this week's episode of Safe Mode is Allie Bohan, a senior director with FTI Consulting cybersecurity and data privacy comms team. Allie, really appreciate you hopping aboard and really interested to get into the conversation.
Thanks, Greg. Happy to be here.
So the comms side of things, when it comes to a cybersecurity incident, I'm very interested to hear your perspective, especially because I'm usually on the other side of that.
Yeah.
I'm usually the one talking to the comms team, trying to find out what is happening. So, yeah, I will lay down my guard, I guess I could say, and
Love
we can a détente, a truce,
Yeah.
and sort of talk about how this all works together. Yeah, from a communications perspective, talk to me about your experience and some of the top line things that when a ransomware attack or a cyber incident occurs after everybody's gone, oh, okay, I have to do something and figure out what to do besides just fix the computers. What do they need to do?
Yeah. A lot of considerations. And I think, first and foremost, as you mentioned, containment, remediation, all of that really important work on the technical side. But you also have, as an organization, a bunch of stakeholders that want to know what's going on. And so that's where we come in. We work really closely with the lawyers, too, to make sure that, we're kind of mitigating legal risk. But, a couple things that we kind of are thinking about from the get-go. And we're normally brought on like in the immediate sort of aftermath, right after a company has discovered an incident. And so a lot of the facts are not clear. And so for us, we try to encourage our clients not to get ahead of the facts, because it's tempting to want to share a message that's reassuring to your employees, to your customers, your investors. But in the early stages of an investigation, and in some cases pre-containment, there's just so much you don't know. And to have to walk anything back is potentially more damaging than the facts of an incident itself from a reputation standpoint. So, for example, we have many clients that are wanting to quickly assure their customers that, for example, data pertaining to them was not exfiltrated. But in the immediate days following an incident, it's almost impossible to know that for sure. The data review can take weeks. It can take months. So we want to position our clients not to say anything that we don't know to be true. And so it's all about focusing on what are the facts on the ground. And, a couple other things, I think really important to set your frontline people up for success. So I'm talking like your people managers, your client relationship managers. They're hugely critical in all of this, and they are taking questions directly from your customers, from your employees, from kind of people externally. And so they need to be able to articulate what's happening. So you've got to train them up. You've got to make sure they have resources to handle those discussions.
Right. Just to put a fine point on it too, we're just not talking the leadership wing here. We're talking about the rank and file, like the really outward facing customers here that need to be looped into a message so everybody can be on the same page.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And, kind of on that same front, we like to come in and help our clients sort of establish an infrastructure for handling, particularly the customer piece. So for any organization we're working with in the B2B space, our clients get flooded with questions from their customers, as they should. Their customers want to know what's going on.
Right.
And so you need a mechanism and kind of an infrastructure for taking all of those in, tracking them all, and making sure you're getting back to those customers with accurate information and in a really efficient, consistent manner. And so that's a really important piece too, is not to kind of leave your customer facing people kind of on their own. Like, give them what they need, give them an escalation protocol so they know who to go to when they get a question that they can't answer. And just make them feel, supported. Because again, they're doing a lot of the legwork on the front lines, if you will. And I think another really important piece is to demonstrate a dedication to improving your cybersecurity posture. I know it sounds cliche, but the response is almost more important and sort of almost more consequential than the incident itself. And so if you can share the tangible steps that an organization is taking to remediate, that can go a really long way. And in the early days, back to my first point about how you want to avoid getting ahead of the facts, some of those things are often the only things you can say for sure in the very early days. They're the only things that you sometimes know to be true in those first 24, 48 hours.
Right. So how would you say, you talked about training for a bit there. I'm wondering if you could talk about like how crucial it is to have regular training and simulation exercises for an organization in preparing for attacks. I mean, a lot of what we talk about, again, relies on that technical aspect of it. Like we've talked to many experts that talk about, okay, well, we need tabletop exercises to talk about what we would do technically, but how much should training focus on not just the technical aspects of it, but really walking through a whole of organization response if there is to be a ransomware attack? Yeah,
it's extremely important. And I think in addition to training, like, make sure you're just doing it regularly. We have some clients who do a tabletop and then for years won't kind of touch.
I was going to ask, what is regular in your life? Like once a quarter, once a year?
I mean, I think at least annually, particularly if you're in an organization that has some turnover and people are leaving, or you've hired a bunch of new folks. You need to train those people up. But no, I mean, you totally summed it up really well, that it's absolutely crucial. And I think we truly do see a higher success rate, if you will, in responding to an incident like more efficiently, quickly, protecting your reputation a little bit better when you have a plan that you can refer to and when you've been trained up on it. And that plan would include things like, I kind of mentioned some of the preparing your front lines for success, but like outlining what all of that looks like. It's much more than just like templates. Okay. Frankly, we don't really like templates, actually. Philosophically, we think grabbing a template off the shelf doesn't have a lot of utility, because the facts are likely not, they may not be exactly as you had anticipated. And
ransomware can be unpredictable from incident to incident. So there is no playbook that's going to tell, what one big company may have, what a small and medium-sized business may do. It's going to be totally different.
And like industry to industry, the stakeholders are so different. I mean, like we work with, in addition to the commercial types, we work with school systems, we work with hospitals. I mean, so you're dealing with parents, students, school boards, or, patients and physicians. And so the stakeholder concerns vary so greatly. And so you really do need a plan that's really tailored to those stakeholders and takes into account all of their unique needs, and what their concerns will be, because they're different. So I think you kind of hit it on the nose. It's crucial. And the plan should include, like I said, it's not just a bunch of templates. It's like protocols and procedures and like a checklist. And how do you even bring this team together? Who's even on the incident response communications team?
Right.
How do you bring them together? What are their roles? Who's, retaining certain vendors? That's usually the legal team, but like, you've got to have that, like, there are so many considerations beyond just how do we make sure we contain the incident and then kind of get back up and running securely and safely.
Do you have an example of a successful training exercise that significantly benefited an organization during a real incident?
Sure. I think, what works really well and what we love to kind of encourage our clients to do is take your training and like tailor them to different functions within your business.
Okay.
So we like to sit down with small groups if we can from different functions like HR and then, your comms and marketing people and your InfoSec people and your customer relationship people, and sit down with them and make sure that they understand their specific role in the plan versus, we love a big get the whole board together, the C-suite together and run through the plan, because there are absolutely roles that your C-suite has. But like at the functional level, sitting down with your people who are going to be actioning the plan day to day and walking them through what their roles are. So I find that when organizations have done that, they've really taken the time to sit down and hold those kind of like smaller group meetings to make sure and to give them an opportunity to ask questions in an environment that's a little more comfortable than like in front of your whole C-suite. Right. To be able to ask questions about the plan and what their role is. And then ideally, if we can do some sort of simulation or a tabletop and like literally mock an incident, but in a way that is educational and where we kind of take breaks and we reflect and we let people ask questions, that works really, really well. And I think it just builds confidence on the part of the organization to where they feel like when that day comes, they just have a little more familiarity than they did before. And so takes a little bit of the pressure off and what's a really high stakes, stressful.
Right. So the stressful part of it is something that I wanted to get into. Like, what strategies do you recommend for maintaining team morale during these prolonged incidents? Because like you said, sometimes these take weeks and months to resolve. And I've talked to many companies that have done incident response for ransomware attacks. And then I've also talked to companies that have, gone through ransomware attacks, and everybody at some level has said that it has been miserable, or all the way up to this was one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah.
Obviously not great for handling anything. We are all human. There is a human aspect to this.
Totally.
I'm wondering what you do to maintain some semblance of team morale in a situation that is obviously a net negative for an organization.
Yeah, I love that question. And it's not one that we often get, but we joke that we are kind of part incident response professionals and part therapists. Right. And I think like we're humans too. And we we see this, and we are crazy people that work in crisis management and cybersecurity. So we come to things with a level of sort of, we've been there and we've seen this, but our clients, it's like in some cases, one of the worst periods of their career, as you mentioned. And so we like to really, at least I like to appeal to people on a personal level and just like, we get this. I mean, this is challenging, but that's why you have some good partners on your side to help you. And nobody should go this alone. There are a lot of really great organizations that can help a client who's experienced a cyber incident, from the legal to the technical to the comms piece. If you're having to engage with a threat actor, there are some great threat intel and, threat negotiating firms. So I think for us, and for me, what I like to reassure our clients of is there are people who do this for a living, and we will take this so you can focus on your day job, because this becomes a second job for people.
Of course. Yeah.
Responding to the incident. They have day jobs. And then all of a sudden they're thrust into this really high stakes crisis moment. And so I think we can help kind of keep morale high by just reassuring our clients that like, we've got this, we're here to support you. You guys focus on what you do best, and we'll focus on what we do best. I will say too, we've seen, I'm always really pleasantly surprised by like company leadership in these moments.
Okay.
I find that for the most part, I mean, like CEOs and C-suite and leaders really rise to the occasion. And like I've had moments where I'm feeling inspired by something that a CEO or someone has said to their workforce or to their team to kind of just, this is like at the end of the day, leaders are meant for this kind of thing. Like they're paid the big bucks to lead an organization through a crisis, not so much just the day-to-day stuff. And so many of them are really good at it. And we work with, and like, I kind of, that gives me a lot of comfort. Like there are a lot of people out there who are really, they're just strong leaders and they bring people with them. And I'm always kind of like pleasantly surprised and just happy to see that there are some like really inspiring CEOs and leaders out there who are like, I'm going to take this on the chin, and here's our plan. Here's how we're going to action it. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this better and stronger. And when organizations take that perspective of let's take this as a learning opportunity and try to actually like improve upon our cyber posture and our cyber culture going forward, like that makes all the difference instead of just kind of taking a really punitive approach.
Okay.
Taking an educational, let's better ourselves approach tends to work really well to kind of keep the morale up too.
So with that learning opportunity, what are some of the long-term recovery steps organizations should take post-ransomware attack beyond just the immediate crisis management? Like the acute phase, I guess, has, if you could refer to it that way, has passed.
Yeah.
What should organizations be doing long term?
I think long term, you really need to be able to articulate your cybersecurity posture and your programs, so that your stakeholders can understand, kind of where you are in that journey. Mm-hmm. We do see a lot of clients, and I get it. I mean, it's kind of human nature. Like you just experienced this crisis and it's so stressful. It's literally a 24-hour thing. I mean, you are losing sleep, you're tired, you're stressed. And once you are kind of able to like turn the page, you almost don't want to think about it anymore. And we do joke that some clients are like, we know you're ready to see us go. It's been a pleasure. But like, we're not the faces that you want to see on your screen day to day. And so there are some organizations who, unfortunately kind of like they turn the page and they're just like, oh my God, I never want to deal with something like that again. I want to go back to business as usual. Like, right. Let's get back to operating kind of the way we were pre-incident. I don't want to think about this anymore. But we have some, and this is where we tend to see they're better positioned for, frankly, the next incident, should it happen, if they've been talking about their cybersecurity posture and like actively trying to improve upon it and keeping those advisors that they hired during the incident on for several months, even to just like, okay, how can we improve? And let's also look back and do kind of like almost like an after action. Like, how did that response go? How could we improve that again? Let's take this as a learning opportunity. That was a tabletop exercise that we didn't plan. So let's kind of evaluate how we did, and what we can improve upon and set up a plan to do that. And so the organizations that we see that kind of, they take it on the chin and they take ownership, and they also take ownership of the sort of post-incident recovery and improvement piece, tend to do really well. And they set themselves up for success should another incident happen. And unfortunately, we have clients who have experienced over the span of several years a couple different cyber incidents, not always because of anything they did, but because of a third party exposure or, a third party incident. So, the more they've learned from the first incident, the better they set themselves up for the next one. And it's an unfortunate reality, but
It is an unfortunate reality. The stats bear it out. Last year, 2024, was one of the worst, if not the worst, on record for ransomware. So I'm sure that you've had, unfortunately, a lot of clients and a lot of work And heading into 2025, we're heading to the end of March, so we're 25% of the way through the year. I'm wondering if you're seeing any recent trends beyond just the volume. I mean, maybe volume is up again, which I would hate to hear about, but what are you seeing out there so far in 2025?
Yeah, volume tends to fluctuate so much. I mean, we have years where, and sort of period, call it a 3-month period where the activity is super high. And then maybe we see law enforcement has kind of had a lot of success sort of squashing the efforts of these groups, and maybe activity goes down a bit. But for the most part, like, ransomware is pretty prolific, unfortunately. And we're seeing, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, and so I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but there are certain kind of things in the marketplace right now that are lowering the barrier to entry for cyber criminals, and kind of spreading this market out farther. It's not necessarily always just a couple groups in Eastern Europe sitting behind their computers. There are affiliates all over the world in some cases. And with the advent of like generative AI tools, like a malicious large language model, like you can, that stuff is scary. And so the barrier to entry for anybody that has network connectivity and like a little bit of cyber how-to can wreak havoc. And so the volume is still quite high. Other trends, I'd say, just to get a little more specific, definitely still seeing lots of your classic double extortion ransomware. So the encryption plus data exfil model is still proving very lucrative for a lot of cyber criminals, but many have also, they're continuing to surprise us with the lengths that they'll go to secure a ransom payment. So some examples for you that we've seen recently, we've had clients who are just getting like ambushed by a threat actor that's sending like hundreds to thousands of texts a day to a CEO to try to bring them to the negotiating table. Literally. And like voicemails, email, I mean, just like in any way that they can reach them, they are just bombarding them to kind of just try to wear them out, like a war of attrition type situation.
You get the sense that is, whether it's AI generated or computer generated, like, or is there really a team that is like, okay, threaten this line of business, and you over here, you go after like.
I think it's both, but probably a little more. I think they're leveraging automated tools for sure to just get the scale. And then we've seen like some really nefarious tactics too, like one that I worked on. We had a client who received a bouquet of flowers and this like really ominous condolence type note to their home address from the threat actor.
That is, wow. That's the first I've heard of that.
Trying to bring them to the table. Yeah. And so their family was there. I mean, it's really scary. And another one that kind of really will give you chills. We've seen threat actors threatening to release inappropriate graphic photos of a CEO's family members.
Oh God. Yeah, that's just like they just have no totally scummy behavior, right?
Extremely. And then, of course, threatening to leak like proprietary information, source code, stuff that would be really damaging to a business. So it runs the gamut, and getting just more and more nefarious. And
the crossover from business level crime to taking it to a personal level, I think is something that we are seeing more and more. That is, look, it's all crime, so it's all bad. But if it's on the business side of things, at least nobody's like losing their lives or their livelihood in the sense of like they're being personally threatened. Once it crosses over to a personal attack, then it starts to get into an entirely different problem that just goes beyond just financial crimes.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a scary world out there, that I'll say.
Well, Allie, I know that you do a great job, obviously encompassing all of this. This has been a fantastic conversation to really look at everything that goes into a ransomware attack. Like I said, a lot of what we talk about on Cyberscoop and Safe Mode has to do with the technical aspect of ransomware. But I think more companies need to understand that so much more goes into it. And that's why we have conversations like this. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks for listening to Safe Mode, a weekly podcast on cybersecurity and digital privacy brought to you by Cyberscoop. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a review and share it with your friends, your coworkers, your CISOs, your sysadmins, your mom, your dad, anybody that wants to know more about cybersecurity. To find out more information or to contact me, please look for all of our social media handles or visit cyberscoop.com. Thanks for listening. Check us out next week.